Hello, Riversiders. Welcome to week 3 of our 5-week series on big church words. Today's big church word is the word righteousness, a word that we hardly ever use in the culture at large unless we're maybe a skier or a surfer. Use it as a slang term like, such a righteous wave, bruh, or something like that. But by and large, we don't really use the term righteousness in everyday speech. In fact, it may sort of be a burdensome term with some religious baggage associated with it. If we refer to a person as particularly righteous, we may actually think of them as sort of better than, thinking that they're better than other people or that sort of thing. It's not really a sort of honorific term that we would confer upon anyone anymore. In the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament though, righteousness is a really important term. So important, in fact, that it's one of the few words in the Hebrew language that actually has both a masculine and a feminine form. And it means to be right. The first part of the word righteousness, right, is essentially the essence of the word. It's to be right or to be in the right. And it refers not really to kind of abstract moral categories like we might think of it today, but it refers to being right within a relationship, particularly according to God's covenant, which stipulates how humans ought to act within the context of their relationships with one another and their relationship with God. So, for example, in the Old Testament, the covenant requires that people care for widows, orphans, and strangers in their midst. And so a person then is righteous if they're doing those things, if they're taking the steps that the Torah required to care for widows and orphans and strangers, then they have a righteous relationship with those people. They're in right relationship. There's other connotations for this word as well. Of course, our relationship with God has a component of righteousness to it. And a human is in righteous relationship with God insofar as we understand that our entire existence emanates from God and that we ourselves are not God. We are the creature and God is the creator. And so insofar as that relationship is properly balanced and established, then we are righteous in terms of our relationship with God. There's even a kind of cosmic component to righteousness in the Old Testament. It's thought to be a sort of force or power within the created world that holds everything together. Insofar as our relationships are well established on the earth, then everything else seems to go well too. The prophet Amos uses the word righteousness a lot, as many of the prophets do, and he pairs the word righteousness with the word justice. This is a very common word pair in the Old Testament. Righteousness and justice are often seen as linked. And if righteousness is established, then justice, which by the way simply means to be fair, justice is established when righteousness has first been established. If our relationships are right, then justice naturally proceeds from that. So prophets like Amos say, let justice flow down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. These two words are often set as parallel as the two things that establish proper relationships within society. Now, again, today we often think of people who are righteous as those who are kind of self-righteous, people who perhaps think too highly of themselves. And the ironic thing is that a lot of self-righteous people actually probably have a lot of broken relationships in their past that have been fractured on account of what they think is the pursuit of a certain kind of righteousness, but in the end it has left a number of broken relationships that in fact reflect a lack of righteousness in their life. So self-righteousness and righteousness are certainly two very different things, and yet the way that we think about them is not always different. So I hope that this Old Testament framing of the term righteousness will provide an entry point to some conversations about what righteousness actually is, how you think about it, and how you might pursue it in your own life today. So enjoy your conversation, and thanks for joining us today.